At the beginning, we were telling people to build these JavaScript web applications, and it was widely considered to be a bad idea. You go back and read the discussion threads on places like Hacker News in 2011, and everyone says things like, JavaScript apps are broken, please stop writing these, you guys have got it completely wrong, this is not what the web is supposed to be about, you guys are, just abusing the system, you shouldn't be writing as much JavaScript, please stop writing JavaScript. Honestly, we were iconoclasts. We had to be willing to commit to the vision and be willing to be ridiculed. People really thought that we were off in La La Land and that this was just a temporary fad and that we would be going back to writing web applications the way we had always written them before. And now, everyone's writing apps like this.
We believe it's really important to have this yearly opportunity for the community to actually get together in real life, in person.
There are some people I literally just see maybe 2 or 3 times in a year on these conferences, but it's always great to just reconnect. And I think actually I'm just here for the merch.
In Ember, most of the people I talk to try to converge on one solution essentially and not do 5 different things.
We're building it together. We're the together framework, I guess, if you want to say that.
If the community is the one that's driving something, it means the community decides what sort of problems are we facing. And because the problems are more or less the same, you end up having solutions that kind of solve problems for everybody else.
Everybody has common interests in Ember and being successful and everything like that. And without strong communities, the technology effectively kind of fades away or isn't relevant anymore.
Thank you all so much for being here. This is awesome. This is my first time at Emberfest and my first time in Amsterdam, and this turnout is amazing. This venue is so cool. For the purposes of this talk, I want us to all hop into a time machine, and I want to imagine what happens in our time machine when we make a new Ember app.
You have to remember, we were just getting out of the dark ages of the post-browser wars, right? IE was dominant, JavaScript stagnated, the web technology stagnated, and then there was this renaissance. There was Safari, and there was Chrome, and there was Firefox, and the JavaScript, they were competing on JavaScript performance, so JavaScript went from being this laughable toy to being this really serious, fast language that we could actually start to do really impressive stuff in. I think around that time was when Yehuda, Katz, had been finishing up the Rails 3 work and was kind of thinking okay, what's next? What should I work on next? So I remember he had built Handlebars at the time, which was this templating language, and he had intentionally designed it to plug into a system that could detect when changes to your data were happening and automatically update the UI, right? So you didn't have to write all this really long-winded lots of boilerplate to keep the UI in sync with the data changing. You had this very simple declarative form. And so that's what he wanted to build, and he architected Handlebars around it, but there was nothing for it to plug into to actually observe those changes happening. So that's how he got to know Charles Jolly, who was my manager at Apple and the creator of Sprout Core. Eventually, Charles left Apple to start a startup called Strobe, and Yehuda came in as co-founder. Of course, they were going to continue using Sprout Core, so the project was to kind of integrate Handlebars, the templating language, into Sprout Core. Yehuda must have seen something in me at that time that I hadn't yet seen in myself.
So I finished working on Rails. I was looking to work on a real app that was built on the framework I was building. So I sat down with Charles And I said, okay, I have this templating engine. Like maybe I can integrate the templating engine with Sprout Core, and then we can have, you know, Sprout Core is like this Apple Cocoa thing, but maybe we can have a variant of it that uses HTML and CSS. I'm like, okay, so Apple is a company, they're contributing. I should like probably talk to them to find out what they want, like whether it meshes or whatever. So we scheduled some meetings basically with people at Apple where I like basically pitched the idea, and it just struck me, like I met Tom in one of those meetings, and it just struck me right away that Tom was like more or less perfectly aligned with how I wanted to do things, like in basically every way.
He kind of just naturally reached out to me. We would talk a lot, we would collaborate a lot, we would try to design these features together. And while I'm still at Apple. So after a few months of this, he's like, hey, you should really join the company, you know, come work with me and Charles at Strobe. And I'm like, dude, I just got a job at Apple as a software engineer. As far as I'm concerned, this is like the pinnacle of career success. Like, why would I ever leave? And you know, he kept working on me. And finally one day I was like, you know, something about the freedom and the energy of a startup finally, I guess, seduced me. So I remember so vividly that day walking in, and it's just like an empty office except for a row of tables and just office chairs scattered around. And I'm kind of like, what did I just get myself into? This is not like the Apple office. And Yehuda's there, and he unwraps a Mac Mini, and he unwraps a wireless keyboard and a mouse, and he hands them to me. He's like, okay, this is our pairing station. Honestly, like the next 4 years of my life are like every day coming in and pair programming with Yehuda. We did everything by pair programming, everything, which was, it was intense, you know.
Somewhere along the way, we realized we don't actually want to be modifying the original Sprout Core, which was like this widget library. Like, we really want to be building a new thing that is more focused on HTML and CSS from the outset. We basically decided, well, we'll keep Sprout Core 1 around. Like, Sprout Core 1 will basically be the widget framework, and we'll reboot a new thing that is philosophically very aligned with what Sprout Core was trying to do in terms of like reactivity, like in terms of when something changes on the inputs, the outputs update automatically, and like we will use a lot of the same design philosophy.
We had this vision of Ember in the future as being, I mean, similar to what it is today, right? Where we have everything from routing to the data layer to application structure and everything in between. We kind of wanted this tool that you could take off the shelf, and it would have everything that you would need to build these awesome web applications that could be competitive with any native app.
So this was like in the same period where we're like trying to start a business. So I think Strobe was sold to Facebook in like September, and we started Tilda right before that. By December, we had renamed it first to Ember and then Ember.
There was this sense of excitement about web applications, single page apps, JavaScript in general. There was just this buzz and this excitement, and people felt like, you know, this is where the energy and the innovation is happening. So we want to get on board, but nothing really existed that was at the level of ambition that we had for Ember. And so people felt like, well, if we want to ride the wave, you know, there was a lot of forward-looking people at different companies who said, this is the future. We want to be a part of it. It doesn't exist yet, and we're going to help make it exist by bringing Tom and Yehuda in, and that ended up being really, really critical.
Yes, that's not. Yeah, I accidentally merged that, and then found out from Nick that I was right to accidentally merge it. So,
we were very small at the time, maybe had 8 engineers, but I noticed people having conversations about how data should flow through our application. Intercom's made up of various different parts. Probably the most recognizable is the little messenger that sits in the bottom right-hand corner of our customers' websites and mobile apps. I had worked a little with Ember before joining. I convinced some people that we should do a little experiment. Maybe we take a week or two and we'll try and build one part of Intercom's web application at the time in Ember, and then we can compare the two. 2 weeks in, little Tomsters started appearing and stickers started appearing across the office. I mean, it was, we built a lot in a very short period of time. And within 3 weeks, we actually had shipped to production a new user list that we were using ourselves that was vastly simpler than the current one we had and much faster. The difference between the before and after was so stark that we pretty much paused product development on our product teams at the time and started figuring out how could we, one by one, move each product team to start using Ember.
When we started Tilda, it was scary. And anytime you start a venture like that, it's this huge life-altering decision for everybody involved and for all their partners and for all their kids. And it's giving up a lot of security. But it was a good time. And it's still a pretty good time to be taking risks in software.
A big part of Ember in general has always been, we want to be a big project. We want to be a project that Gavin could use for Intercom. And at the same time, up until that point, projects that did that needed to be embedded inside of large companies with project management and structure and money. And the way that you make sure you get things done is that you know you're getting stuff done because your manager assigned to these 3 people these tasks, and if they better do it or they're fired.
What Ember's about is taking that stuff that you have to have a team of 20 people building, commoditizing it into this open source infrastructure that a team of 2 or 3 people can use to build a similar quality application. But, okay, we're just, 2 guys working on this. We just started this startup. How do we pay our rent?
So I was trying to figure out at the time, and Tom was as well, how to structure things so that we would be able to get community help. I had experienced Rails, which is a big project, like the one I wanted to build, but didn't have that property. And I kind of wanted to repeat that. And jQuery also. jQuery and Rails were both projects that were meaty, that weren't little micro projects that were used by big companies, but nonetheless weren't hosted inside of one giant company. And therefore, the project management was a community project.
That was around the time that Angular started getting popular. And so we're looking there okay, we really believe in the vision of Ember. We think there's a lot of things that we do better than Angular. But Angular has an entire team of developers at Google, and we have no funding, right? So we had to kind of persuade people hey, come work on this thing, and you should work on it because you get ownership over it, right? And I think in order for people to do quality work, they need a sense of ownership over what they're doing and influence.
If we hadn't started Tilda, if some entity like Tilda didn't exist and instead Ember was a project that Yehuda and Tom and whoever were working out of some other big company, there's a good chance by now that some executive from on up high would have come down and been I don't care about this, scrap it. And that would have been the end. But because we have these smaller, people-driven companies in our ecosystem, that's not really going to happen.
People love contributing to open source projects. It definitely allowed the project to get a scope that was more like what we wanted without having to do it ourselves, which is good.
I think the biggest growth in the Ember community and for the Ember project was probably before the 1.0 release and in the 1.0 release, when the concept of single page apps as such was still relatively new. People were coming from their existing classic web apps they had built with Rails in most cases, and were looking for something that would allow them to bring their front-end code to the next level, have it more structured, have a more vivid and application-like user experience. And I think during that time we saw the biggest growth in the Ember community.
But it's doing something. The way that we have it now, this is a pull request that was actually merged into the main card stack. Any changes that we do to that data repo on the remote won't be reflected on staging ever.
And that is not part of the existing Git data source yet?
The local repo one works fine, but the pushing doesn't exist.
Oh, okay.
So that's
there was always discussion about Ember dying, right? There was always like, React is so huge now, Angular is so huge now, Vue is so huge now, so Ember probably has no future in that world, it's dying, it's slowing down, and so on. And that was never true, right? Like, Ember, it's just like defending its sort of position as the most popular underdog in the front-end world. So we have hired people who said, I want to join your company so I can work with Ember. Many people are strongly invested in the project and in the community on a personal level even. And that makes a big difference.
It was very easy to dismiss Ember as something that was on the way out all the time because there was no obvious source of backing. And there was at some point where it felt like all the momentum was actually going towards Angular, and there was this period of time where Angular growth was just skyrocketing, right? Just and every time I look at the charts, I'm just like, oh God, this is miserable. We were always a little bit behind, and then we put in this massive burst of energy, sheer force of will. We're going to survive no matter what, and you can't get rid of us. And I just remember feeling really blown away and relieved when I heard, oh yeah, by the way, LinkedIn is porting their entire site to use Ember and going to be a single page app. And I was just like, okay, we've made it.
There is still some concern that LinkedIn is such a large percentage of the total resources available that if there are things that other people are interested in, it might not get done. And it just doesn't happen, I think, because we spend so much effort trying to prevent it. And Tom has been really great at this internally. And a big part of that, honestly, is LinkedIn believing strongly that getting consensus for the things that they want is the best thing for their long-term interests, so that they don't have to maintain the feature that they built. They don't have to continue to defend it in public, right? Basically, this is a feature that everyone owns together.
The thing that made LinkedIn interested in Ember is that they knew they could get a seat at the table in the technical decision-making, the roadmap, all of these things, and anyone can. If you want to pick up Ember and you want to bet your business on it, and you want to have a say in how things go, what we do, what the framework looks like in the future, you just show up.
Nobody wants to invest their time and energy into a project where all the actual decisions about what's happening next are happening behind closed doors, and you're going to find out about it by going to a conference. People are contributing 5, 10, 20 hours a week want to feel like they're a part of it. And so there's a link between open decision making, open source, open communities, and getting resourcing from people who have it. Those are connected.
We've hit the point right now where things get a lot more stable and a lot more secure because we have the small companies that helped us get out of the nascent phases of the Ember project that allowed us to like make some mistakes and figure things out and grow up a little bit. And now we have the grown-up companies who sort of come on in and help us take on these massive initiatives and fund new projects and full-time contributors and things like that. So we're in a good place right now, and getting here has been pretty nice too.
I'm really excited about the future of Ember. People are really looking for the types of solutions that Ember has historically been very good at.
With Ember, you can already start at the 9th floor, to build a 10-story building. Whereas with other frameworks, you might start at the 5th.
Software has a tendency to live for a long time, and productive software tends to live a long time, and communities tend to stick around them.
I would prefer to be in a community where it's the community that decides how should we drive the project.
It's very hard for me to estimate if it's gonna grow or shrink or stagnate. I wouldn't be really sure, but I kind of have the feeling it will still be very stable for sure for quite a long time still.
It's been quite a ride. It's old, but it's not necessarily old in the way that is antiquated or anything. We just need to keep working on the right stuff.
All of the good ideas will end up in Ember. It's just a matter of time.
We have always wanted to build something that lasts. I think in the beginning we said something like, we're going to build a framework for the next 10 years, at least. And I think we're coming up on 7 or 8 years now since the first Ember release. Ember has never been more technically advanced. Codebase has never been in a state of less technical debt. The energy and the excitement in the community has never been higher. It's really surprising and really validating to see that JavaScript frameworks don't have to be disposable software. Web applications don't have to be disposable software. You don't need to tell your manager, we need to stop writing any new features for the next 6 months because it's been 2 years and we need to rewrite. I think Ember is a symbol of the fact that is a false dichotomy. To me, the future of Ember, really, I think we're just getting started.
I've given talks at conferences about this, and the audience is always full of people who are like, this pipe dream sounds really nice, but how come you're not dead yet, or whatever, right? They're always in there with these horrible end-of-the-world scenarios, and in most cases, it's okay. It's a good time to be taking risks in software and to be following your passion projects and trying to bootstrap companies that can support both the finances and whatever your lofty goal is. In our case, we want to build open source software. We like it, it feels good, we like giving back. We really like the community that you can build around an open source project, and it's just a whole different feel from working inside a big corporation. And I don't think I would trade it.
I really hope the best of Ember is ahead, because I think front-end engineering needs it. I think front-end engineering needs an example of something that is not trying to tell people that when something goes wrong, it's their own fault. It's something that tells you, if you're a beginner, this is for you.
All right, hey everyone. I'm Tom Dale. This is Yehuda Katz. We are together the
creators of Ember.js. Our tagline, the tagline for Ember is a framework for building ambitious web applications. And Yehuda and I have given a couple talks before about what it means to be a web application, and we've given a few talks about what it means to be an ambitious web application.